Salvete discipuli, bene advenisti. Acroasis XXIX. From Caput Duodecimum, chapter 12, pages 96 through 97 and 98. De perfecto tempore et eiusdem usu, on the perfect tense and its use. Recognitio, tempore. Let's talk about the tenses that we know. Quid est tempus? The tense of a verb answers the question quando, when. When is the action of the verb taking place? What are the tenses that we know so far? The first one we learned is the present tense. Nunc. This represents things that are happening now in present time. We also have the imperfect tense, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide, and the future tense, which refers to things that will happen. All of these tenses use the present stem, and so their morphology is very similar. To remind ourselves, we find the present stem of a verb by going to the second principal part and cutting off the RE, or in the case of the third conjugation and third IO, cutting off the ERE. Comparatio, comparison. Imperfectum et perfectum, between the imperfect and the perfect tense. When we look at the science of grammar, there are certain terms that are very important, and one of them is perfect. In terms of grammar, perfect means complete. That is to say, we are talking about an action that has come to an end and is contained as a single event. Now, we can talk about the same things that have happened both in the imperfect and perfect tense, but it's the way that we perceive of them. So, for example, demonstrabant, they were pointing out. So, when we're talking about this as something happening, we use the imperfect. Likewise, if we're talking about something that is habitual, or that was habitual in the past, we also use the imperfect. Mitebat, he used to send. So in the first example, demonstrabant, this could have been going on for a period of time. For the other, mitebat, this is used to describe a particular action. So if I wanted to say, he used to send me a birthday card every year, then I would use the imperfect because I'm referring to this as an habitual action in the past. If I wanted to say, they were pointing that out for several hours, then again, because I'm putting it within the terms of the passage of time, I use the imperfect. On the contrary, when I use the perfect, I'm talking about it as a single thing. Demonstraverant, they pointed out. They pointed something out as a single action. Misit, he has sent. So I could say, he has sent me a birthday card for the very first time ever. So I'm talking about it as one single event. Let's move on. A more engaging comparison of the imperfect and the perfect is a very old metaphor that grammar teachers have found very useful. Think of the imperfect as a movie. That is to say, I'm showing you footage of something that's happening. In this case, we're going to talk about a man hanging from a clock. It will make more sense when you see the slide. So I would use the imperfect. For this example, I'm going to use the verb pendo, pandere, papendi, pensum. Take a moment, quickly write that verb down in your notes, and then we can proceed. All right, so let's look at our sentence. Homo ille in orologio pendebat. Watch the following clip. All right. So, homo ille in horologio pendebat. That famous man was hanging on the clock. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this using the perfect tense. The perfect tense functions more like a photograph. It's a quick snapshot in time, so that I can show this to you and we see this as a single event, as opposed to the series of actions which you just watched. So, in the sentence, homo ille in horologio pependit, we are talking about this as one single event. So, we have that famous man hung on the clock. That famous man has hung on the clock. That famous man did hang on the clock. One single event. Discite, the thema perfectum, the perfect active stem. Quid est thema? What is the base? What is the stem? To find the perfect active stem, we go to the third principal part and we drop the I. So, for the verb intelligo, intellegere, intellexi, intellectum, we go to that third principal part, we drop the I, and that leaves us with intellects. These rules apply to all verbs. Every single verb will use the same rules to determine its perfect active stem. Likewise, the endings that I will show you on the next slide are common to all verbs. So let's take a look at those. Discite conjugationem perfectum activum. For this example, we're going to use a verb that we know very well by this point. We'll use voco, vocare, vocavi, vocatum. Quid est thema perfectum? What is the base or the perfect active stem? To find the perfect active stem, go to the third principal part and drop the I. That leaves us with vocav. Now, at this time, go ahead and on your paper, make a chart giving first, second, and third person, and then columns for singular and plural. So, we know what our perfect active stem is. Pause the video and write that in. Alright, you should have written wokawa, 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 wokawa on your paper 6 times. Now these are the endings that we're going to add to them. I, isti, it, imus, istis, erunt. So let's go ahead and do that together. We'll also translate the forms using the simple past. Remember, there are 2 other translations that are also acceptable. So we have wokawi, I called. Wokawisti, you called. Wokawit, he, she, or it called. Wokawimus, we called. Wokawistis, you called. And wokawerunt, they called. Nonulae sententiae, a few sentences. Dum ille hanc audiebat, acerba in illum, we want to say, while he was listening to this one, or to her, she said acerba, harsh things against him. While he was listening to her, she said harsh things against him. So, we're going to use the verb dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. At this moment, pause the video and write on your paper what you think the correct answer is. When you've written that down, resume the video. Alright? Did you write dixit? If so, you are correct. Let's look at our next example. Quoniam soror tu laborabat, ego eam. So we want to say, because your sister was struggling, I helped her. And for this example, we're going to use the verb adiuo, adiuare, adiui, adiutum. So you should have, because your sister was struggling, I helped her. Quoniam soror tu laborabat, ego eam adiui. All right, and for our last example, quod tu estas literas blank, poenas dare debes. We want to say, because you wrote that letter, you ought to be punished. You ought to pay the penalty. Because you wrote that letter, you ought to pay the penalty. And for this example, we'll use the verb scribo, scribere, scripsi, scriptum. Again, pause the video, think about the answer, and resume the video when you think you have the correct answer on your page. Did you write scripsisti? If so, you are correct. At the moment, I'm going to go ahead and put up a link for your homework. Please go ahead, follow the link, fill out the Google form, and I'll see you tomorrow. Valete omnes.